Good evening, YouTubers. I'm back for video number 2. Um, it's been a long week. I'm hoping this will help me decompress. To be honest, the thought of making this video puts a lump the size of a golf ball in my throat and totally throws my stomach into complete turmoil. But at the same time, if it helps one person out there, it's worth it. That's how I feel about it. So here we go. I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses from the time I was born. Actually, my mother and my father got married when they were about 20, 21. Um, had my sister shortly thereafter. Both of my parents were technically Catholic, although not really practicing. Um, my aunt, my mother's older sister, is actually the one who got my mother involved with the witnesses and got her studying. Um, And my mother basically came home one day when my sister was a little over a year old and basically said to my dad that they weren't going to celebrate birthdays or holidays anymore, um, and that she wanted to become one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, my dad always thought of himself as just a Christian man. He was never super religious. He was raised Catholic, not super religious or anything. So he was pretty complacent. His attitude was, as long as you raise my kids well, I don't really have a problem with it. So he kind of took a back seat, and my mother, in that sense, wore the pants in the family. So she raised my sister and I as Jehovah's Witnesses, and she always strived to be the good witness mom, always getting us to the meetings and out in field service. I never spent a normal summer as a kid. It was always going out in field service, pulling practically pioneering hours without actually being a pioneer. But it was difficult. It was hard growing up. It was hard not being able to do the things the other kids in school did. I'm also from a fairly small town, and my sister and I were the only witnesses in our entire school system for most of my school education. I'll get to the one person who came on later on. But it was hard. We had no other witnesses. The one person in my congregation, the couple of people who were even close to my age, were lived in a whole different city. Um, I actually attended the Dobbs Ferry congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, um, and we shared a hall with the Yonkers congregations as well. So we didn't have a very large congregation. At one point, actually, our congregation numbers dipped rather low. So they had assigned a bunch of Bethelites who were living in Paterson, New York, at the facilities there. And it was a bit of a drive. They were about 15 to 20 of these brothers were assigned to our particular congregation. They were all, I don't know, between the ages of like 19 and 30, I'd say. And they came around the time I was 12 or 13. They were assigned to our congregation to help beef up our numbers, and I think just because we didn't have enough of a presence, so it helped beef up the number of the people in our congregation at the time. Um, Now, getting back to the witness stuff, my mother got us out in field service, got us to every meeting. It was highly unusual for us to miss any meetings. It made it difficult. Of course, as you all know, when you're in school, you're not allowed to partake in um, after school activities, and I was always a rather athletic kid, and I always wanted to do that stuff, but it was always explained to me that even though my father was a non-believer, he did study on and off, just never wanted to commit. He was a smart man. Um, but basically, I was explained to me that if I wanted to partake in after-school activities such as sports, that fine, but as soon as it interfered with going out in service or meetings in the evenings, I'd have to stop. And of course, the first late practice, the first away match, rendered that impossible. So although I tried to do several things through school, it never lasted more than a week because I couldn't keep it from interfering with my activities as a witness. And I really resented that as a kid. It was really hard to not be able to do the things that all your friends were doing, the things you were interested in doing. I had to go home and study the Watchtower, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays I had to go home and, after school I had to do homework, I had to shower, I had to get dressed for the meeting, and didn't even get home till like 10 o'clock at night. Um, my mother, being the good witness woman she strives to be, also decided to open up our home for the Thursday evening book study. So on top of homework and showering and getting ready, I also had to clean our house so that it was presentable for the book study on Thursdays. So, as a kid, I definitely resented that stuff. I wasn't able to just be a kid. And what kid doesn't want to be a kid? Um, I made the grave mistake of getting baptized at the age of 13. Um, my best friend in our congregation, her name was Sarah, and we decided to get baptized together. She was an elder's daughter and an elder's granddaughter. A lot of the people in our congregation seemed to have the families were multi-generational. There were two, three generations of one family that were witnesses. And it was hard because it was just my mother, my sister, and I. My dad supported us in the witnessing work, but really just wanted no part of it overall. I mean, I think he gave a talk once, but really very sporadic involvement over the years. So yeah, I got baptized at the age of 13. Um, Biggest mistake of my life, obviously. Um, it was hard. It was just all around. It was hard. Um, so anyway, at the age of 13, I can't remember exact sequences. This is going on almost 20 years ago. So, and I try to block a lot of this out. So I might be getting my time frames mixed up a little bit, but I know I was baptized at 13, and I believe it was that summer. My older sister, she's 6 years older than me. My older sister decided to study abroad in Japan for a semester, and of course, she stayed with a witness family that were hosting her. And of course, she went to meetings when she was there. It wasn't all about studies. And her plan was to spend, I believe, a couple of months in Japan and then to go to Hawaii for another month and spend that month with witness friends of ours who happen to live in Hawaii. So she was going to be gone for about 3 months. During that time, we had an extra bedroom in the house, and what a lot of the witnesses did was the Bethelite brothers that lived in Patterson. It was quite a commute for them. So especially on weekends, they would often people who were able to accommodate them, people who could host them for the weekend, would have them come on Friday. That way they were local for socializing, going out in field service, and for the Sunday meeting. So they would basically stay at a local brother's house for the weekend. So again, my mother, striving to be the good witness woman that she always strives to be, um, decided that since my sister wasn't around and her bedroom was empty, that she would be able to host a couple of these Bethelites. And since they were assigned to our congregation, I mean, we got to know them, and they weren't like total strangers or anything. They had been assigned for, like, I believe they were temporarily assigned, and then it was made permanent, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so one weekend when I was 13, my mother hosted, I don't know if it was one or two that stayed. Um, but it was funny because this was a time in my life I really, really, really needed my sister, and of course she was studying abroad. But I can't help but think that it's a foreshadowing of things to come. I needed her and she wasn't there, and a few years later she would permanently not be there. Um, so anyway, so we hosted these brothers. They came on a Friday night and they were going to stay the weekend. And on Saturday night, I went to bed and I wasn't yet sleeping. but one of the brothers who was staying at our house decided it would be okay to come to my bedroom and get in my bed with me. And I was 13. I grew up as a sheltered person. Um, I froze. I didn't know what to do. I was petrified, and I wasn't raped or anything, but I was definitely, I guess, what you could call molested by this individual. And I will reveal his name because he has not gotten any of the justice he deserves. So anyway, that was a Saturday night, and of course we had our meeting the next morning on Sunday, and the whole time it only lasted maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and the whole time it was going on, I pretended I was asleep. I wasn't asleep, but I froze. I didn't know what to do. My parents were 2 rooms away, and here is this Bethelite who we were nice enough to open our home to, who felt it okay to get in my bed and touch me. So, after a few minutes, I don't know if he bought that I was truly sleeping or not, but he ended up getting up and leaving and going back to his room. So the next morning at the meeting, I kind of lost it. I ended up breaking down to my best friend Sarah, who I don't know why I thought she would keep her mouth shut with a father and a grandfather who were elders. But of course, she ran and told them, and everything came out, and it was a really, really, really rough day. And you know, we had a rather once the Bethelite brothers came. I mean, I was younger. I was only 13. They were older, but we would all hang out and socialize in large groups like witnesses do. Um, and you know, the gentleman who did this to me, we had a lot of mutual friends. We had hung out a few times before. Nothing close to thinking anything like this was going to happen, but um, it did. So, of course, word got out on Sunday, and I was never told what happened to him. The elders never made a announcement at the meeting. I believe one of our mutual friends told me after the fact that he was given a one-way ticket to Cali and told not to come back. I don't know if that's true. He could have just told me that, just to tell me that. I really don't know. I was a kid, and it was easy to lie to me, I guess. So that was a really, really, really hard time. It was really hard that I didn't have my sister there at the time. Um, it was just a really hard time. And I was only 13, so I can only imagine, you know, people who endured worse abuse at the hands of Jehovah's Witnesses. I can only imagine because I feel like what I went through was bad enough, and it's really nothing compared to what others have gone through. But anyway, needless to say, I never saw that guy after that day. Um, like I said, no announcement was made, no public reproval, no private reproval. I literally just saw him taken into the back room with a group of elders, and that's all. That's the last thing I saw of him. This person's name is Terry Cobb, Cobb. And the reason I put his name out there is if I could give this guy just a little bit of justice, I'm all for it because I know the elders didn't dole out any. He received nothing. Now, what's interesting about the fact that he received no outward disciplinary action is when I was 15, I got caught smoking. And oh boy, shit hit the fan. And I was pulled into the back room, and it was my first offense ever. So I was privately reproved. A few months later, I was caught smoking again. Yeah, I got a little rebellious by the age of 15. Could you really blame me? But anyway, I got caught smoking again, and this time I was publicly reproved. So they announced to the congregation that I was publicly reproved, because that's how a public reproval goes. And of course, I was mortified and embarrassed and, you know, shamed and all those wonderful emotions that a normal 15-year-old should be feeling, of course. Um, So that was that. I'm gonna make a part two.